Welcome back, everybody, to the PFF NFL show. Trevor, Sikkema, Dalton, Wasserman here with you guys for the moment. We'll also have our guy Teron Armstead here with us as we preview every game coming up in Week 11 in the NFL. Exciting slate, Dalton. We have some potential Game of the Year candidates this week. We've got I think some matchups that will be some playoff previews, and obviously with a handful of teams maybe looking towards next year, we've got some games that have some draft importance as well. How you feel, my friend?
Feeling good, feeling excited. You're right. This is a big week. This feels like the set the tone week for the rest of the year, right? You got some huge games, some divisional games. You got some teams trying to bounce back from bad losses last week. So I really think this is going to be the first domino in the rest of the season and figuring out who the best teams are and what these playoff standings are going to look like.
I didn't go back and see which games they were, but you got a game on me last week. We not only preview all these games, but we'll also give you our prediction, score prediction, who we think is going to win all that. And we don't go against the spread. We just go straight up. You went 9-5 last week. I went 8-6, which means on the season, we are once again dead tied 97-51 and 1, of course, because neither of us got that tie correctly. But yeah, this is coming down to the wire here with me and you. I'm very curious to see over the next couple of weeks, hey, did one of us pull away? Because at that point, when we get to the end of the year, we might start having to throw some Hail Marys. Then the show might actually get really fun when we try to convince ourselves and the audience of something that maybe we believe is a little bit of a long shot. But we'll see how these next couple of weeks go. Hey, we're going to talk about a lot of numbers here on the show. If you guys want to see all of these numbers for yourself, best way to do that, PFF Plus subscription, PFF NFL Show 25. That's the best way to get 25% off a PFF Plus subscription. Just go to subscribe.pff.com. Check all that out. We'll throw a lot of numbers at you here on the show. You can follow along, but you can also do your own research, which we always encourage people to do. The PFF database, it's not just, hey, we're throwing single stats at you and we want you to believe them, like no context, anything like that. We want you to be able to see these numbers for yourself. And if you go, hey, I actually think this number may lean into a different part of the game than what these guys talked about, well, then you've got the numbers to back that argument up as well. So check it out. If you don't have it, PFF Plus subscription, PFF NFL Show 25. That's promo code to get 25% off. Your New York Jets kick us off this week with Thursday Night Football. The Jets are traveling to New England to face the New England Patriots. It's Rob Gronkowski week with him officially retiring as a member of the New England Patriots. They're coming off of a road win against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're just straight up one of the hottest teams in the NFL. And the Jets, well, they've unfortunately, it feels like, been on the headlines for non-winning reasons, but coming off a big win this week. How do we feel about the Jets' chances going into New England? You want to talk about the Jets or you want to talk about the Patriots?
I'll go with the Jets' offensive side. And obviously they've won 2 games in a row, and Justin Fields was good a couple weeks ago against the Bengals. But this past week with less than 60 passing yards again, that's the third time in the last 4 games that he's had less than 60 passing yards. Plus, Garrett Wilson is going to be out multiple weeks. So, as we know, if the Jets are going to win it all on offense, they're going to have to run the football. And the guy who is having a resurgent year for him is a guy that they did not trade at the deadline, and maybe they'll extend him in the offseason, is Breece Hall. He's had a solid year both running and catching the football. Had the big 42-yard touchdown on the screen pass last week. That was the Jets' only offensive touchdown. But you look at Breece Hall being really the one big threat now in this Jets offense. 24th in rushing grade, 4.8 yards per carry, is solid 4th in the league in explosive 10-plus yard runs, and also very good as a receiver this year, 11th among qualified running backs. This has to be the focus, really. All the gravitational pull on New England's defense should go towards Breece Hall in this game. If you slow him down, the Jets don't have too many other options on offense. That's both in the rushing and the receiving game. Obviously, Braylon Allen's been out for a while. Isaiah Davis has played relatively well, but this Jets offense is basically right now the offensive line and the Breece Hall show. If New England can slow him down, especially with Robert Spillane and their front 7, the way the run defense is playing lately, then they'll probably hold the Jets to a pretty low point total, and then they just have to do something the Cleveland Browns couldn't do and not give up 2 kick return touchdowns.
Right. You can't be giving up 2 special teams touchdowns and expect to win the game. Even the Jets will beat you if that is the case. You know, when we're talking about the New England Patriots on their side of things with the offense, Drake May's been fantastic, right? He's been in the MVP conversation. He's a big reason why this team is playing the way that they are and why they are so successful. But outside of 3 or 4 like explosive plays, kind of broken plays against the Buccaneers last week, the Buccaneers actually defended the run pretty well, and they actually defended Drake May pretty well. Now, it was those big plays that ended up being the reason why they lost, and of course, you can't give those up. But I wanted to try to find, okay, where was the truth, and how did Todd Bowles, for the majority of the game, force Drake May to struggle in a way where we really haven't seen too much of that from him this season? And what I found, Dalton, is that, I was like, okay, did he struggle under pressure? Because Todd Bowles likes to blitz quite a bit, and it's like, well, he didn't really struggle that much under pressure. But then as I kind of dug into the tape and where some of his lowest graded passes or incomplete passes, just ones where he was really struggling, it was when the Buccaneers actually dropped more guys in coverage. So when we think of Todd Bowles, we think of how aggressive he is, how he likes to send more guys in the blitz, all that good stuff. But in reality, the plays in which Drake May really struggled the most were those simulated pressures, those mug looks where the Bucs had a lot of defenders at the line of scrimmage, and they were sort of, like walking around the line of scrimmage. You don't know where the pressure's coming from, and then boom, the ball is snapped, and then all of a sudden there were 6 guys towards the line of scrimmage, but now 2 of them are fully retreating back into coverage. One of them is a linebacker or a safety spy on Drake May, and then it was really only 3 players who were rushing. When you look at May last week versus the Buccaneers, 50.5 passing grade when the Buccaneers dropped 8 or more in coverage. And like I said, they would show that simulated pressure look. A lot of them would drop back, but they also had that linebacker. A lot of times it was Lavonte David, who would then be in a spy role so that if the Buccaneers were to get pressure with one of those 3 guys, which normally they could get a little bit of it, Drake May, as he would roll out of the pocket, boom, that linebacker, whoever the spy was triggering down on him and saying, okay, now you got to get rid of the football because now I'm coming to sack you or tackle you at the line of scrimmage, whatever it is. So every time that Drake would maybe get out of the pocket, put his eyes back upfield, then there's so many guys in coverage, a lot more than he's used to seeing, because a lot of times it was pressuring him via the blitz, so there were less guys in coverage. I took that to more of a season whole scope because I wondered if it was just a bad day at the office for him in that regard. Drake May has a 42.0 passing grade when facing 8 or more guys in coverage, and he has an 85.2 when it is 7 or less. So I'm not saying that like the blueprint is out on how to defeat Drake May, but it's very interesting that even though they beat the Buccaneers and they got those big plays, for the majority of the contest, what Todd Bowles was throwing at him, he was not ready for, and he was not playing nearly as confidently as he has before. So I'm curious if the Jets take anything away from what Tampa was able to do, if they put more guys back in coverage, or if they kind of stay a little bit more aggressive. We'll see. Ultimately, I think Patriots win this game. I think they win it convincingly. Maybe not scoring as many points as some might think, but 24-7. That is my final score here, and I'm going to have the Patriots win this one.
Yeah, it's a good call you make on May, but the Jets' defense still usually stays pretty aggressive. Aaron Glenn likes blitzing. He likes his man coverage, and I think, look, part of the answer to that, too, is the Patriots have to run the ball a little bit better. Now, they got a couple home runs with Travion Henderson last week, so maybe that's the start of something there, but they need to be more consistent in the run game to stay out of those situations where you would see those drop 8s and spies and things like that. But you're right. I mean, I think New England, obviously, they're the home team here. It's a short week. The Jets coming off 2 wins, and they're playing a little bit better, especially on defense since Jermaine Johnson got healthy. I think Jermaine Johnson and Will McDonald against the 2 Patriots tackles, Will Campbell and Morgan Moses, is going to be a fun matchup. But at the end of the day, the Jets just don't have enough offensive firepower here to go in and compete with New England's offense. 28-10 New England for me.
I agree with you. We got our last international game of the season here as the Washington Commanders and the Miami Dolphins are going to be facing off in Madrid on Sunday morning. You want to talk about the Commanders, or do you want to talk about the Dolphins?
I'm going to go with this Dolphins run defense. Now, we know the Commanders want to run the football. Obviously, it's been a little more of a struggle to get vertical on offense without Terry McLaurin, with Marcus Mariota in at quarterback, right? But they still want to run the football with Mariota himself, with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, with Chris Rodriguez, Jeremy McNichols, right? They still need to be able to run the football to succeed. But we've seen a major turnaround in this Dolphins run defense. The first 5 weeks of the season, they were the lowest graded run defense in football. Trevor, over the last 5 weeks, they have the highest run defense grade in football. It's just been as polar opposite a turnaround as you could find, and a big part of that is that their defensive line has played a lot better. We talked a lot earlier in the season about their defensive line really struggling. They have so much talent up there, but they were playing below their talent level, right? Zach Sealer and Bradley Chubb. Kenneth Grant, the first-round pick, has gotten a lot better the last few weeks. Get Jordan Phillips involved in there. They're only getting negative grades at the second, it's at the second lowest rate in the NFL. well over the last 5 weeks. 7th fewest missed tackles, and again, their defensive line really leading the charge here, just playing better up front. You saw it with a lot of these five-man fronts they used against Buffalo last week and really shutting down that run game. This has been a trend for about a month now, so if they continue this play in run defense, it makes things a lot easier for his secondary. You put your team in better down and distance situations on defense. I really think that's been a big turnaround, and this front seven has become a threat with the D-line playing well, and Jordan Brooks at linebacker has been outstanding all season.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Brooks has been playing well. Jordan Phillips has been playing well. Their rookie there, Kenneth Grant's been playing a little bit better. And so the defensive line, yeah, overall, and I think that's why it was such a storyline for us at the beginning of the year. As we go, this unit's way too talented to be struggling the way that they were. And now, did I think they were going to be the number one run defense like they have been over the last couple of weeks? No, but I think the truth is probably a lot closer to how well they've been playing lately versus how bad it was to start the season. On the other side of things, with the Dolphins offense, you know, we've talked about this quite a bit. At the beginning of the season, I highlighted how if the passing attack wasn't running through Tyreek Hill, the return on investment and the EPA per pass numbers were relatively low. He was basically their only consistent explosive threat. He was the guy who, when they got the ball to him, you were going to get points out of it, or you at least had the best chance to get points out of it. Now that he's out for the season with that knee injury, the pass game has still been good some weeks. But Dalton, what we've realized is that if there's not explosiveness in the run game, if there really isn't this balance, or if they can't really lean on those guys in the backfield, well, if you just have a pass-heavy day, a lot of times defenses are going to be able to key in on what Tua is doing because he is so much of a pre-snap read type of a quarterback. The ball is coming out of his hands so quickly, and so if there's any sort of safety rotation or, you know, a linebacker dropping to a spot where he's not expecting it pre-snap, it's easy to sort of slow down and even create some turnovers on this Miami Dolphins offense. But when they are running the football, we've seen that's where they get their wins. That's when they really become a tough offense to stop, even with Tyreek Hill not in the lineup. So when I was looking at their run game specifically, there was a set of run plays that I noticed they're performing very, very well, and that is with pull leads. So counter plays where you've either got a guard, a tackle, sometimes both, who are pulling and lead blockers on a single play. 80.3 rushing grade on plays that involve a puller or those counter plays. And I pointed this out on Monday specifically. I feel as though Patrick Paul, their offensive tackle, has been fantastic at that. Just getting him in open space, getting him to the second level, allowing these offensive linemen to, maybe they're not going to bully you up front in a phone booth between the tackles, but a lot of these guys are athletic enough to pin and pull to the outside and block well enough in space, and that's really where Devon Achane can do a lot of his damage anyways. So the fact that is their highest graded run blocking play is also a great sign into sort of having that identity in the run game. And when you look at the Commanders, I just feel as though they've really struggled in that regard, getting these guys out in space where the linebackers have to flow and take on offensive linemen. Like, they have the ability to do it, but it just has not been very consistent. Nothing's been going well for the Washington Commanders defense. All that to say, international games are weird, man. And with Dan Quinn taking over as the defensive play caller now, I think that he's going to notice things. I think he's going to have this defense just naturally take a little bit of a step up. And with these international games, I really never know what's going to happen. So I'm actually going to take Dan Quinn in this one to win the chess match against Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa with one or two extra turnovers here. And I'll actually say the Commanders are going to win this game by a score of 24-20. Who do you have in this one?
I think it's actually a great call on the Dolphins with the east-west nature of their run game. And I think these linebackers, Bobby Wagner and Frankie Louvu, absolutely love them. But you mentioned it earlier in the week too, that they like to get downhill. I think between the tackles, if the Dolphins try to run in there, they're going to have some issues, but they might be able to outrun them to the corner. I like the way their front seven is playing. I like the way that they're getting their guys in space. And Jalen Waddle, with a big week against the Bills last week, he could be in for another one against a struggling Washington secondary. I'm actually going to take the Dolphins 30-24. I think both teams are going to find points in this game and some explosive plays, but I think the Dolphins' speed makes a big difference in this game.
Okay, getting to the Sunday slate, let's talk about our first Sunday afternoon matchup here, the Bears and the Vikings. And NFC North showdown here between these two teams. You want to talk about Caleb? You want to talk about J.J. McCarthy? Which team and which offense you want to start with here?
You know, looking at this Vikings offense, and there's so much talked about, okay, J.J. McCarthy and how he's struggling and the accuracy and everything like that, and just the offense as a whole and why it's not clicking on all cylinders. And I think, there was a similar factor to this last year. It wasn't quite as drastic, but it wasn't as noticeable either because their defense was so good and everything was rolling so well with Sam Darnold. So this year in the first quarter, the Vikings ranked 12th in both offensive grade and EPA per play. Okay, so they're the 12th best offense in football in the first quarter. This is regardless of quarterback. The rest of the game, it peters out. 29th in offensive grade, 29th in EPA per play. They're a bottom 5 offense, which is ironic because when you look at the first time they played the Bears, they were terrible for the first 3 quarters and then took off in the fourth. But basically the rest of the season, this is what it's looked like. And they just haven't been able to keep the rhythm and get into the depth of the playbook and sustain that level of production. We know Kevin O'Connell is one of the best scripted play callers in the league, right? 2-3 drives, first 15 plays, he's outstanding. It was the same way with Sam Darnold last year. He comes in with great opening game plans on the first 2 or 3 drives, but they're not able to sustain it, right? The offensive line isn't physical enough in the run game. McCarthy's accuracy, especially last week, really waned in the second half. He got kind of erratic and things started to speed up on him a little bit. So the Vikings are having issues playing all 60 minutes on offense. I could see them getting off to another good start in this game against a Bears defense that is suspect a lot of weeks, but you have to be able to sustain that for the entire game. If Minnesota can't do that, they're giving the Bears a lot of opportunities, and lately the Bears late in games have been excellent on offense, especially with Caleb Williams improvising outside the pocket. The Vikings have to find a way to sustain offense for the entire game.
So for the Bears, you look at Caleb Williams, who's played incredibly well over the last 2 weeks. Specifically, I think that Ben Johnson has done sort of what everyone has wanted Caleb Williams coaches to do at the NFL level, and that is harness what he did really well at USC and just turn that into sort of a pro offense, if you will. And that's been a really tough code to crack, I think, over the last 2 years. Is even really to start this year, I feel like there was some struggles there. But over the last 2 weeks specifically, Ben Johnson's done a great job of getting Caleb in positions where he's able to make plays outside of the pocket, which is a big reason why he was a Heisman Trophy winner and one of the best playmakers in all of college football for 2 straight years. 78.7 passing grade when rolling out of the pocket over the last 2 weeks. He's got 2 big-time throws and 0 turnover-worthy plays when that has been the case. So, whether it's been just him being a little bit more confident in what he's seeing downfield, whether it's been something that they've worked on in practice where, hey, they tell the receivers, they're maybe kind of like working on these fire drills where it's like, hey, if we get to 3-4 seconds into a play, Caleb's going to roll out, and he's going to roll out, obviously, to his throwing side, so he's going to roll out to his right. This is sort of where we want you guys to go. We want you to make sure that you are the person getting deep, that we want somebody to be in the middle, almost like creating a little bit of a sail concept there for him to be able to read and throw to as he runs to the sideline. It just feels like the chemistry is really there when Caleb has been rolling out. Specifically, though, I think this Chicago team has just been run blocking and running the ball very, very well. Last 2 weeks, again, specifically, 84.9 rush grade as a team. That's 4th best in the NFL over the last 2 weeks. 82.1 on power run concept. So we're talking about between the tackles, being able to move a man against his will. Now, this Viking matchup is an interesting one because the Vikings, their defensive line, if we're looking at just handling power, I know you could throw linebackers in there as well, but handling power, I want to see how you handle things up front. So the edge rushers and the defensive tackles for the Vikings this season, they have a top 10 run defense grades for just their defensive line, and they are top 10 in average depth of tackle. So they're not yielding a lot of yards. They're not getting pushed back too far. They're making tackles near the line of scrimmage. That's something that I think could force the Bears into those passing scripts maybe a little bit more than they're normally comfortable with. It's kind of a toss-up in this game for me. It's funny, I was, as you were talking, I was like, who did I pick in this game? And this is actually a box that I forgot to fill out. This is the one game that I forgot to fill out here. So that actually makes sense that I couldn't remember who I picked in this game because I didn't pick them. You picked the Bears 27-23. I think the Bears are on a roll. I'm going to do that as well. I'm going to go Bears 24, Vikings 21. I just have a little bit more confidence in where the Bears are right now. I think the Vikings are going to play a little bit better and a little bit more consistent than they have over the last couple of weeks, so I think it's going to be close. but give me the Bears. I think they've warranted me picking them here in this game with how they've played.
Agreed. They've won 6 out of 7, and Ben Johnson's really found the wheelhouse of this offense. I think the biggest difference right now between this year and last year is that last year, Caleb Williams had to control the entire offense and really had to spearhead it. This year, it's Ben Johnson, and it's this offensive line first and foremost, and then Caleb has to take over when he has to, right, in the fourth quarter last week. But you've seen in a lot of these games recently where it is not just, hey, Caleb, you have the wheel, you have the keys, do everything for us. They're running the football well. You mentioned the last couple weeks, but for the season now, they are top 5 in both rushing grade and run blocking grade. So the running back, Swift and Monangai, have been really good. I think that balance is really going to help them, and Drew Dahlman and that offensive line are going to carry them to another win. Like you said, I have it 27-23 Chicago.
Man, Chicago's getting 3 points in this one. I didn't even notice that until right now.
Books don't believe.
I like that one.
They don't want to believe.
I like Chicago getting 3 points there. I really do. I think that could be a solid bet. Famous last words, but I feel like that could be a solid bet. Okay, we've got one of the premier matchups that we have this week. Bucs-Bills going at it. This one's in Buffalo. It's a 1:00 Eastern game. We've got our guy Teron Armstead back to preview that trench matchup of the Buccaneers offensive tackles versus what the Bills got at edge rusher. Let's hear what he has to say about this one. Here we go, back with our guy Teron Armstead for another trench breakdown. We're talking offensive tackles for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers versus the defensive linemen, particularly their edge rushers for the Buffalo Bills. This is an exciting game that we got to get to. There's a lot of talent on both sides of the ball, especially on the trenches. But specifically, Teron, I want to talk to you about arm length. It's something that's talked about a lot during the draft process. Some people think it's way overblown. Who cares how long a guy's arms are? Who cares what the wingspan is? If they can play, let them play. But there are points to where it does matter. And for a guy like Greg Rousseau, fantastic defensive lineman, he uses that unique length to his advantage. Now, Tristan Wirfs, he's got 34-inch arms, so he's got adequate offensive arm length for the NFL level. Luke Gedeke next to him, or on the other side, I should say, he's got shorter arms. So we talk about a guy like Greg Rousseau, somebody who uses length to his advantage. I know you got decently long arms yourself, so it's not like you had a big disadvantage during your day. But how do you go up against guys who use length to their advantage as pass rushers?
Yeah, the length aspect of O-line, D-line play really doesn't matter until it does. And what I mean by that, when you have someone with elite arm length, like Greg Rousseau, that's when it can become a strength of theirs, and it's a part of their pass rush plan and all those things. So Greg Rousseau, with his length and what he's able to do to keep guys from getting connected to him, that's when it becomes a challenge. Someone like Tristan Wirfs, not as much, because even if Greg Rousseau makes contact first, Tristan has enough anchor to stop power. But guys that struggle with power, Greg Rousseau getting that first contact, getting the long arm in, he can drive those guys back, and they are really just fighting and trying to die a slow death and hold them off from getting to the quarterback. I love this matchup. Greg Rousseau, we haven't seen the best of him, Trevor. I still think is so much more levels to his game as he evolved, and I don't think he uses arm length enough. Even from playing against him personally, it was easy for me to anticipate when the long arm was coming, and a lot of times I would knock it down early in the game because I know it would mess with his mind, mess with his psyche. So then he'll be hesitant to use his long arm for the rest of the game. So first quarter, if I ever got a chance to trap a long arm, I knew I had him from using that move the rest of the game.
Okay, I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper into that. You talk about, hey, I knew when it was coming. I know just from talking to you over the course of the season, that goes into, getting into the film, getting in the lab, making sure that you got the certain tells on guys. But, for somebody like Rousseau, who when you were going up against him, obviously it was a couple years ago, so he's grown as a player since then. But what are some of the tells, when you are watching these guys who they like to use length as their advantage, dictate that contact like you mentioned? What's some of the tells where you feel like you said what's coming, and then what are the counters to say, okay, when I do know what's coming, I'm actually going to be the one who's going to get to my counter first, and I'm going to be able to neutralize it?
For sure. It's guys that don't telegraph, that don't advertise their moves. Those are the ones that are extremely difficult to block because you are late to react to everything. A guy by the name of Von Miller, he was like the master of disguise with his rushes. Everything looked the same. Which is why you see a guy like Von, who doesn't have long arms. He's not the biggest defensive end we've seen, but we've seen him consistently long arm tackles to the quarterback, to the ground, because they just cannot see it coming and he doesn't telegraph, he doesn't advertise. Younger players, and Greg Russo has done this in the past, well, as he's going for his rush, you'll see that inside arm just freeze. Like he's watching, he's literally watching, he's looking to find his entry and try to get that long arm into your chest. Me being like a veteran player, by the time Greg Russo came into the league, I had a really good feel and like vision on a long arm. I was not the one to let long arms get into my chest at all. So with my inside hand, anytime I see that inside arm freeze and I see that hand start to extend, I'm trapping. And what I mean by trap is I'm breaking that wrist, forearm area, and I'm knocking it down before he can ever touch me. And with that momentum, most of the times it send D linemen to the ground. So you see Deion Dawkins, he does it a ton. You see Trent Williams, he does it a ton. Those guys are anticipating and they're reading that rusher as that arm freeze and he's looking for his entry, timing it up, hit the wrist, hit the forearm. Those guys going to the ground.
I love it. I love the teaching we got going on here on this show. The last thing that I want to talk to you about is defending the run and in the run game. It's more than just the guys up front. Obviously, it starts up front, but specifically for Buffalo, their second level has been an issue for them when it comes to defending the run. Not that they don't have talented linebackers, but it just overall, it's been tough for those guys to be consistent this season with how they defend the run. If you're an offensive line, how do you take advantage of that? How do you look at a team that you go, hey, the weak link of their run defense really seems to be, or should you say the inconsistencies comes from that linebacker level? How do you attack that? Is it something as simple as, hey, we're going to run duo a lot more this season or a lot more this game? Or is it something where it's maybe a different part of the game plan where you're just saying, hey, we're trying to get you to climb to that second level a little bit sooner to really put those guys in conflict and give those guys a tough job? How do you attack linebackers who might be struggling to defend the run like Buffalo kind of has been so far this season?
Yeah, no, you said it, Trevor. Is getting attached, getting connected to the second level. You don't have to have a kill shot. You're not looking to blow up the linebacker. All you want to do is get to the second level and get connected, get in the way. These guys are struggling to read. Their gap discipline and gap sound has been off. It's been inconsistent. Different than what we've seen in past years from the Buffalo Bills. And Miami, in their last game against the Bills, they took advantage of that to the highest level. Aaron Brewer, Patrick Paul, those guys were getting into space, getting into the second level, getting connected, and it showed. Devon Achane had a huge game against those guys. I'm sure Tampa will try to take the same approach this week against Buffalo. If you can get the front line, like get the play started, get the ball back to the line of scrimmage from that front line of the Buffalo Bills, you can get the center, the guards up to the second level. You got potential for big plays. We saw that last week.
Well, Teron, we appreciate it. I know you're headed out to Madrid to take a look at your Dolphins taking on the Washington Commanders. So travel safe, my friend. Enjoy it, and we'll see you next week.
Appreciate you, bro. See you next week.
All right, there we go. Teron Armstead helping us preview this Bills-Bucks matchup here. Dalton, where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about the Bills or you want to talk about the Bucs side of things?
Yeah, I think assuming Baker Mayfield can be protected by Tristan Wirfs and Luke Gedeke against Greg Rousseau, against A.J. Epinesa, against Joey Bosa, then he's looking to attack down the field, right? And the one problem that he's had this season is that even when he has seen too high safety looks with the Bills, which the Bills do employ a lot, it's a staple of the Sean McDermott, Bobby Babbage defense, a lot of too high safety looks, Mayfield has struggled a bit. He's trying to force it. There are times when it's been very high, as you know, and there's times when he's put the ball in danger. He's been kind of a gunslinger this year, and lately, the last 3 games, he's only completed 2 deep balls, and those were last week against New England that were right at 20 yards. And you're not talking about those big vertical routes that create 50 and 60-yard touchdowns. So you look at Baker Mayfield this year against 2 high safeties, 61.9 passing grade. That's 22nd among all quarterbacks with at least 50 dropbacks against 2 high safeties. Most big-time throws in the league, but also the second most turnover-worthy plays. You're getting this gunslinger version of Baker Mayfield. Now, he's had to carry them through injuries, but the accuracy has wavered a bit against those looks. He's got the 5th highest rate of uncatchable passes. He's going to have to be a little more patient, I think, at times, and sometimes just manage the game a little bit better. I understand that the high end comes with it. He's the 4th highest graded deep passer in the NFL this year, but against all these 2 high looks that he's going to get against Buffalo, he might have to just calm it down just a little bit and work to the chains a little bit more to manufacture relax your offense and possess the ball a little bit longer.
And Bucky Irving practiced today, so looks like he could be on track to play in this game. Obviously, that'll be a big deal for the Buccaneers if he can go out there and play. For the Bills, there's a lot of talk about them, going after a Rashid Shaheed or a Jalen Waddle or somebody to be able to take the top off of a defense and give them some extra speed there when they're getting into their passing attacks. But I try to look up some numbers to show that, Buffalo is just terrible when it comes to explosive plays or targets 20 or more down the field. They're really not. They're kind of middle of the pack when it comes to targeting guys 20 or more yards down the field, when it comes to hitting these shots and getting those explosive plays when you are looking deep. But it's not that they're dead last in the NFL. This is still an offense that can move the ball relatively well, even beyond 20 yards. Now, is it as potent as it could be? No, but I didn't really find a lot of numbers that said, this is a major issue for this team. It's really just something that might be holding them back from winning a Super Bowl or being as good as they can possibly be. It's not something that is keeping them really down and making them a terrible team. So I wanted to make sure that I say that before I say, Dalton, the book on the Bills this year, if they turn the ball over, they lose. They don't, they win. That's basically it. In games where the Bills have 2 or more turnovers, they are 0-3, and they have a 15.0 points per game average. The games where they have 1 or fewer turnover, they are 6-0 this season, and they have a 33.5 points per game average. That is insanely different. And when we talk about turnovers mattering, this team, it probably matters the most for the Buffalo Bills. The Buccaneers are tied for 7th most turnovers forced in the NFL this year with 14 total turnovers. And so I think it's just going to come down to Buffalo taking care of the football. That's what I think it is all about with them. Then, of course, defending the run a lot better than they have been throughout this season. I'm going to go with the Buccaneers in this one. I think it's kind of a coin flip, but I think the Bucs are going to play better, more efficiently. I think Baker Mayfield is going to be on the big-time throw train a little bit more on this game. So I'll go Bucs 28, Bills 27.
Yeah, this was the hardest game to pick to me, and it's a great call about the turnovers. And I think what you have with the Bills is you have an elite quarterback, obviously, in Josh Allen. Any week you have him, you can score a lot of points. But at the end of the day, they're a ball control offense, right? And to the turnover part of that, it means you're not controlling, you're not possessing the football. You're going to have issues scoring points. And the Bills don't have the wide receiver group that's built to come from behind and overcome those mistakes. So there's still a ball control, run-first offense with all their tight ends and heavy personnel and everything like they like to use. So it's a really interesting matchup also to see if Todd Bowles is going to send a lot of extra pressure like he does on most quarterbacks on Josh Allen, because generally what you unleash there is Allen's legs and his ability to break pressure running the football. Tough game to pick. Bills are still really hard to beat at home, though. I think you're getting a high-scoring game. I think both quarterbacks are going to have a lot of success in this game. I'm going to take Buffalo 34-31. We get a high-scoring one.
It's funny that you mentioned, the playing from behind versus playing for a lead, because there's 2 things that I looked up with the Bills for this game, and I was like, oh yeah, this will probably be my talking point here for this game, just because of feel going into the research. The first one was, like I said, are they really just terrible at attacking deep down the field? And they're not. They're right around, like I said, league average, but they're not terrible at it. And then the other stat I looked up was offensive grade, or even passing grade when playing with a lead or when not playing with the lead. And Dalton, the numbers aren't as bad as you would think. But again, when we're watching these games, it feels as though when this team is playing with a lead, they're just playing so much more confidently. But they're still playing decent, at least when it comes to when they're not ahead on the scoreboard. So that was another point where I was like, oh, I wonder if I'm going to find the numbers and say that the Bills are just terrible at this. But they're not. I think that a lot of the way that we view the Buffalo Bills right now is we're comparing them to a championship caliber team. And I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. This team has Super Bowl aspirations. But I think then how critically we have been of the Buffalo Bills, to be honest with you, sounds a little harsh outside of the fact that they just have to take care of the football better than they have in the games that they lost.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. They have Super Bowl aspirations. That's why they're held to such a high standard. And at the end of the day, we're going to judge this team in the postseason, right? Whether they win this division or not, because, look, they've got a hole to climb out of even with trying to catch New England. And New England's got a relatively easy schedule, at least on paper, going down the line here. But either way, the Bills are going to be judged in January, not necessarily in October, November. Sure. And, look, there are moments you show signs of weakness, but they weren't going to go undefeated. Nobody's going undefeated. So there's times where you have to overcome your flaws and just work through it, and that includes even in a game that they just lost against the Dolphins. And look, they got to bounce back. They go back home to Buffalo where they're comfortable. I think they're going to have a good day on offense here. I do. I just think we know in the back of our minds there's one or two things. We look at the Bills and we go, I don't know, back seven on defense, receiving core, things like that. We'll find out week to week how that goes in the regular season. I'm not worried about them in the short term. Come January, I might have more of those concerns.
Packers are traveling to the New York Giants, taking the Giants, who Mike Kafka, now the interim head coach, Jameis Winston now starting at quarterback for the New York Giants. And, of course, the Packers are coming off of the last couple of weeks where they've really struggled to move the football, including on Monday night where they struggled against the Eagles in that loss. You want to talk about the Giants or the Packers side of things for this one?
Just in case anybody in his 11th season in the NFL forgot who Jameis Winston was, I just felt like giving the primer on that and making a little graphic about Jameis Winston and how he played last year for the Cleveland Browns, because he was pretty good, to be honest with you. You could argue he was the best quarterback in a Browns uniform last year pretty easily. But it's also still a roller coaster, right? You get a 69.5 passing grade, which is solid, especially when you're talking about a backup, a guy who might play 1 or 2 games here. 9.7 yard average depth of target. That was the 3rd highest in the league last year. So as he's done since we've watched him at Florida State and back in the days with the Bucs, Trevor, he was, going to sling it downfield. That's what he does. That bears itself out with 11 big-time throws and limited work, but also 18 turnover-worthy plays. I think at this point, Mike Kafka's just, if Jackson Dart is not going to play, and it looks like he's not going to, he's looking for a spark in this passing game to just give it to somebody who's not gun-shy. Because I think outside of the Cowboys game where they lost by a field goal, that shootout early in the season, Russell Wilson has looked gun-shy. You saw it again this past week against the Bears in the 4th quarter. He's just not willing to stand in the pocket and throw the football downfield. So he wants to get somebody more fearless in there who's going to give him a shot. Maybe it won't work. Maybe the receivers will or won't execute. Maybe Jameis will turn the ball over 4 times. But at the very least, you don't just have someone standing back there in the pocket frozen like Russell Wilson has been in most of his appearances this season.
Yeah, I think that Jameis was, in my opinion, the quarterback that was always going to give you the best chance to win. He's the closest thing to what you liked and wanted to do with Dart. This is long overdue, in my opinion. He should have been starting a while ago, even I think maybe even before they put Jackson Dart in there, but it is what it is. So I think that we're going to see at least that their offense give themselves a little bit more of a chance. Is Jameis going to give you a little bit more bad? Yes, but he's at least going to give you a chance to win football games. On the Packers side of things, Dalton, I wonder if their lack of offense really does stem from the issues that they have on the offensive line. And it could be execution on the offensive line, because when you look at the last 2 weeks, specifically when the Packers have struggled, their offensive line's got the 21st ranked overall PFF blocking grade, and they're 19th specifically in run blocking grade, something where they would like to be a little bit more balanced and they would like to be a little bit more consistent when it comes to the run game. So the offensive line overall has struggled. Elgton Jenkins now getting hurt this past game. That's obviously not ideal for them. And I wonder if just the way that they're calling plays, the way that they have a little bit more of a conservative approach than what you thought they would have in the passing game. I just wonder if it stems from the fact that they, and when I say they, I mean Matt LaFleur, doesn't trust their offensive line. He just doesn't trust them to have a lot of protection, a lot of time for Jordan Love, because I think there are moments when Jordan Love shows you he's still got the arm, he's still got the ability to attack deep down the field, but it just doesn't seem like that's a major part of the Packers' passing attack. And so the offensive line has to bounce back in this game, in my opinion. And it's a tough week going up against a really talented Giants defensive line, but if they're going to go out there with that same sort of game plan to protect the offensive line, I don't even know if they're going to beat the Giants. And the Giants are obviously really struggling this season, as they have fired Brian Daboll already in the middle of the season. So I think the Packers do bounce back. It's too much talent, in my opinion. I think they're going to figure it out. I think they've looked at the last 2 weeks. They're going to go into the lab, and the defense has been playing really well. Jeff Hafley has that defensive side of the ball playing really, really well. I think that's going to still be a factor here against Jameis Winston. And on the offensive side of things, I just believe that it's going to be better. I believe that they're going to figure things out. I believe that the offensive line is going to be a little bit more cohesive. And I think that the Packers are going to have a better game against the Giants than they have over the last couple of weeks. Just maybe it's because I'm ignorance is bliss, just betting on the talent that they have, but it's got to look better than what it has over these last couple of weeks. So I'm going to still take the Packers in this game. I'm going to take the Packers 24, the Giants 17. I think it'll be close-ish. I think that's right around where the line is, with the Packers being favored by 6.5. But I just think that it's got to look better than what it has over the last couple of weeks, just by default.
Yeah, I think the interior really is the issue right now. When you've got Jenkins is going to be out for a while with the leg fracture. You've got Jordan Morgan, who has always been a question whether or not he can play guard. Now it looks like he's just going to be the full-time right guard with Sean Ryan moving into center. Aaron Banks, the expensive free agent there at left guard, has not been great at 53.5 PFF grade. So I think it's that interior against Dexter Lawrence this week that really would be a concern for me when you talk about the Packers trying to run it between the tackles. But I'm also worried about the Giants offense, and with Jameis Winston or Russell Wilson, whoever at quarterback, I'm actually worried about how that affects their run game, because they were so much better at running the football with Jackson Dart on the field as an option threat. The design game, the scrambling, you're just not going to get that out of either of these other two quarterbacks, no matter which one is playing. So I'm a little worried about how the Giants are going to manufacture things in the run game this week. Maybe they get a little more vertically out of Jameis Winston, but I don't know that they're going to be two-dimensional. I like the Packers defense as the best unit on this field. Green Bay 20, New York 13.
The Panthers are traveling to Atlanta to take on the Falcons. Now, this is still a battle for second place in the NFC South, and with the Bucs kind of dropping a couple of games here, right? They're not taking advantage of that. They're not extending their lead too much there in the NFC South. So these teams are still within striking distance, but they haven't played well, especially as of late. You want to talk about the Falcons, or you want to talk about the Panthers here?
I think we have an issue. We're back to an issue now of Bryce Young being able to attack downfield. Now, the second half of last year, weeks 9 through 18, Bryce Young was the highest graded passer in the NFL on 10-plus yard throws, over a 93 passing grade. Right now, this season, through the first, 9 games for Carolina, 10 games for Carolina, actually, a 54 passing grade on 10-plus yard throws. 41% completion rate, only 8.1 yards per attempt, which for these throws is very low, and only a 32.5% accurate throw rate. That's bottom 5 in the NFL. This offense, the ability that they had to throw the football downfield, like they had the second half of last year that really sparked them, it's just gone right now. And it's a major issue, because even for as well as they're running the football, if you stack the box and you dare him to throw, if you dare Bryce Young to throw it over your head, he's just not getting the job done. They have to find a way to create vertical plays in the passing game, or what's going to happen is these entire defenses are just going to keep creeping up to stop Rico Dowdle and Chuba Hubbard, and maybe Bryce can throw it underneath a little bit, but you can't play in this 10-yard box. It has to be where Bryce has to get hot the second half of this year like he did last year. If he doesn't do that, then we're going to have questions about his viability as their starter. Last year, the spark came from his ability to throw the ball vertically down the field. They're not getting that right now, and it might be hard to get that against this Falcons pass defense that's been really good, and Jeff Ulbrich throws a lot of different looks at you.
Yeah, and we just did a mock draft over at NFLSC, and I actually had the Panthers taking Mekhi Lemon. And that would be the third year in a row that the Panthers have taken a wide receiver in the first round. And there were some people who were like, there's no way they take a wide receiver again in the first round. But I kind of said to them, I was like, I agree with you. It seems unlikely. You certainly don't want to do it. But at the end of the day, if the season were to end today, what receiving options do you have to lean on going into next year? It's just Tet. Like that's it. And you can't do that. You cannot go into next year with just him to lean on. Now, Xavier Legette's been okay at times, but he's still inconsistent. Jalen Coker hasn't played due to injury, but they even, they said before the week, hey, we want to get Jalen Coker more involved. They weren't even able to do that this past week. The tight ends, they've played well, but I don't think they're going to be a focal point of this offense. They're going to be able to keep things balanced. It allows you to go to heavy personnel, but something that you can consistently lean on, I don't know about that. That's what's missing from the Panthers offense right now. But that's not to, absolve Bryce of blame, because there are, I think, plenty of times where he does have the ability to open it up, and he just doesn't have that confidence, or he's just not seeing it the way that he needs to. The timing's not there. The accuracy's not there. It's a big issue for him. And we basically talked about this more on Monday. We went more in depth into this. But when the Panthers aren't running the football well, they don't have a passing attack that they can lean on more than the run game right now. It basically has to be 50-50 at least in order for this team to be successful. So on the Falcons side of things, though, Penix, he hadn't been much better. When you look at this past week, 36% uncatchable passes thrown. That was worst in the NFL this past week. And a lot of it was, again, we talked about this on Monday's show. It was those sideline throws. It was those timing throws where he's either skipping it at the receiver's feet or he's throwing it way over their head. He just doesn't have a lot of confidence in being able to throw the ball exactly where he needs to. to give his wide receivers a chance. And going off of that, this whole season, Penix doesn't have a quarterback rating above 90. Remember, this is out of 158.3. He doesn't have a quarterback rating above 90 to any receiver that's not Drake London. And that includes Bijan Robinson. So Penix just does not have a lot of confidence in the receivers that he's throwing to right now outside of Drake London. And when you become that one-dimensional, that's when things really start to be an issue for you. So it's something that Penix just simply has to play better. Penix and Bryce just simply have to play better. Dalton, I have no idea who wins this game. I really don't. I think this is a coin flip because both of these teams have shown they can play well. Both of these teams have shown they can play very poorly. The Falcons are at home, so I'm going to go with the Falcons, 23-20. That's my final score here.
I'm going to give you a little weirder score, a similar vibe there. 26-20 at Atlanta. And I trust Jeff Ulbricht's defense. And honestly, the first time that the Falcons played Carolina, it can't get any worse than that. So, I mean, they have to play better than when they lost to them 30-0. And I still think the best player on the field here is Bijan Robinson. And the Falcons are going to find a way to get him involved early and have him control the pace of this game. And, the only other question I have with Bryce Young, Trev, and I think there's a lot on the line in these last 7 games for him as far as not just the team, but I think his career. You mentioned the mock drafts and another receiver and all of that, but if he keeps playing like this, what are the odds you get to February and you don't have a 5th-year option picked up and you're talking about, maybe they're looking at this quarterback class pretty soon here?
Yeah, because he's on the 3rd year right now, right? Yeah. And so so he has the 4th year next year no matter what. And then it would just be whether or not they would pick up the 5th-year option for him after that. I think, barring something just catastrophic where he plays terrible, I think Bryce is this team's starting quarterback next season. But I hadn't really thought of it to that extent. Maybe you are right. Maybe the door is open for them to be open to a change because they benched him once. Right? They benched him once after those 2 terrible weeks at the beginning of last season. And really the only reason why he got back into the lineup is because Andy Dalton got hurt, right? It's Andy Dalton getting hurt. And then Bryce comes back and then they're like, thank the Lord he's playing well. Now we can stick with him. Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't have a great second half to the season here, I wonder if they think about all options. Do they think about a veteran option? We talked about Kyler Murray potentially being available with what's going on in Arizona. Do they get into that conversation? Are they looking at the quarterback conversation in this class as well? Interesting. I think this game could mean a lot to that narrative because it's those 2 teams that are battling for the middle of the NFC South right now. And they're both in a spot where these teams desperately need to get a win. And, of course, the fan base is going to react in an even bigger way with them being divisional opponents. Okay, before we get on to the next game here, parenting, folks, filled with all sorts of high-pressure decisions, right? It can sometimes be difficult to tell whether we made the right financial decision for our family, for our kids specifically. But here's one thing that you can do to help your kids right now. That's opening up a UGMA kids investment account from Fabric to start their investment journey and give them a financial head start. Fabric by Gerber Life was designed by parents for parents to make it easy to plan for and manage your family's financial path. With the kids investment account from Fabric, you guys can start investing in your child's future today. Kids can't invest while they're minors, but this specific UGMA kids investment account allows you to invest on their behalf, gives their investments so much more time to grow. The whole thing is online. Setting up an account could take you as little as 5 minutes. You get started investing with as little as $1 a day, and then you just manage your child's account, monitor those investments right from your phone. No contribution limits on it. It's got multiple tax advantages. It's all SIPC insured up to $500,000. There's no commission fees to it either. Just low flat monthly maintenance fee. When your kids are younger, maybe you're dipping into it to help them with tuition, after-school activities, books, things like that. When they're a little bit older, maybe you're helping them buy a first car, first house, start a business, whatever that looks like. Join the thousands of parents who trust Fabric to help protect their family. Start investing in your child today at meetfabric.com/PFFNFL. That's meetfabric.com/PFFNFL, MEET, fabric.com/PFFNFL. The portfolios are managed by Fort Washington Investment Advisors Incorporated. Additional services provided by Apex Clearing Corporation. All investing is subject to risk. You can learn more at meetfabric.com. Titans, Texans. AFC South showdown here. This one's in Tennessee. Dalton, you want to talk about the Titans, Texans? And is this game in Tennessee? Does that mean that the Titans have a little bit of an edge here? What are we going with? What do you think?
Tennessee coming off a bye week too, right? And the Texans off that big emotional win.
A lot of time to think about it.
Big 19-point comeback for the Texans. Maybe expended all their energy. We'll see. I'll tell you the one thing I do feel in this matchup, Trev. I feel bad for Cam Ward because you talk about, look, Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter off the edge. The first time these two teams played, they combined for 12 pressures and Hunter had 2 sacks. On a team that's struggling to win pass protection all year and Cam Ward's trying to figure out the NFL on the go, he must be thinking, wait a minute, I got to play these guys a second time. You look at what they're doing off the edge in Houston this season. These two guys combined a 91.7 pass rush grade put together. 96 total pressures between them. Houston doesn't have to blitz at all if they don't want to because they've got Anderson and Hunter dominating off the edge. Combined for 16 sacks. Daniil Hunter had 4 of them last week, 3.5 officially if you want to go that route. And they are first. Anderson is first, and Hunter is 4th among qualified edge rushers in pass rush win rate this year. The first thing you have to think about if you're Tennessee before any sort of scheme, route concept, whatever you want, how in the world do we block these two guys? Because nobody's figured out how to do it yet, and Tennessee has struggled in pass protection all year, but they took over the first game. They're taking over pretty much every week so far this season. That's the first thing you have to answer is what in the world do we do to work around Will Anderson Jr. and Daniil Hunter?
Yeah, and not a very easy question to answer for anybody, let alone a struggling Tennessee Titans offensive line. On the Texans side of things, Davis Mills was a roller coaster, and it looks like there's a chance that he is going to start this upcoming weekend against the Tennessee Titans. I read a report that C.J. Stroud was still having concussion symptoms, including sensitivity to light as recent as last Friday. So there is a chance that he is missing a second game in concussion protocol, which means that Davis Mills would start once again. Now, Davis Mills, it was an up and down performance for him really throughout. I think the first 3 quarters of the game, it was a struggle. Overall, he was 27 for 45, 292 passing yards. He had 3 big-time throws and 4 turnover-worthy plays. All 3 big-time throws came in the fourth quarter, though, in that big comeback against the Jacksonville Jaguars. But that's not what I wanted to point out the most here, Dalton. Quietly, very quietly, the Texans' offensive line playing a little bit better, right? Very critical of them to open the season, very critical of them this offseason when it just felt like they were like, yeah, I mean, O-line, we'll figure it out. Yeah, it's all good. We'll draft a couple of guys, it'll be all good. And we're like, it doesn't work like that. And, their hands were tied in some situations, although they were the ones who traded away Laramie Tunsil. Certainly your hands aren't tied in that regard. But we looked at their depth chart along the offensive line at the beginning of the year, and we were worried. And the year started off, and our worry was warranted, and they really struggled in that regard. But over the last 3 weeks, they're 17th in the league in overall team pass blocking grade, and they are 14th in the league in pressure percentage allowed. So being middle of the pack, that's kind of all we asked for the Texans offensive line. Titus Howard, Ariante Ursary playing better as their offensive tackles. It's still not as consistent on the interior offensive line, but at least the offensive tackles are playing a little bit better lately. And so that, I think, is a really good sign for the Texans that as the season is going on, they have at least been playing better to league average when it comes to offensive line play. Ultimately, I just don't have a lot of faith in the Tennessee Titans. Now, with this game being in Tennessee, with Davis Mills having as many turnover-worthy plays as he did last week, I still think this is maybe just going to be a rock fight, a slugfest, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to go with Texans 17, Titans 11. How are they getting 11? Don't know. But I'm going 17-11 is the final score here.
Obviously, Trev, they're getting 4 safeties and a field goal. That's how.
Of course,
it's really the most logical route to getting to 11 points. I mean, I'm with you. I like Houston a little bit more than that. I trust Davis Mills at least for one more week in a spot like this against a team that offensively in Tennessee is just overmatched by this Houston defense. They're outstanding, especially in pass defense. And last time, look, the Titans stayed in this game for 3 quarters, and then the Texans routed them in the 4th. But I just like the Texans and just the number of weapons that they do have on the outside. Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel really really emerging. And you mentioned that offensive line. Got to like the play lately of Ariante Ursary over the last 3 weeks as well. So I'm going to take the Texans. I'll take them 24-10. I think even with Davis Mills in there, they have enough to get this done. The offensive line is playing better, and I just think that defense is way too much for Tennessee to handle.
Bengals and the Steelers. This one's in Pittsburgh. Kind of feels like the Bengals season's on the line here, right? Because, their record's obviously not great. What are they, 3-6? Is that what their record is right now?
Yeah.
I think they're 3-6. Joe Burrow's practicing again. So if you win these next 2 games that you play, you can realistically get Burrow back in there. And there is an outside chance that you could still make the playoffs this season. As wild as that is to say. But if you lose the next 2 games, I don't know, maybe even if you go 1-1, do you think you're too far out of it? Do you not even want to risk it with Burrow? Now, it feels as though Burrow's been working his butt off to get back out there with his guys. It kind of feels like he's gonna play. But this is the conversation that we're having here. You win against Pittsburgh this week, and all of a sudden, your season maybe becomes a 1-game season next week. And if you win that one, like I said, the cavalry's coming, you get Joe Burrow back. And for as much as, no, Joe Burrow doesn't play middle linebacker for this team, we know that things are different when Joe Burrow is out there and when he is a quarterback. You want to talk about the Steelers here or the Bengals?
So I think it's a good call real quick on the Bengals. Here's some other factors, too. If they beat the Steelers, they have the tiebreaker over the Steelers. That's big time when you talk about the division race. 2, I think the plan is going to be to have Joe Burrow back by the Thanksgiving night game in Baltimore, and they play Baltimore twice in a 3-week stretch. So if you have Burrow for both of those games, give yourself a shot to win both of them. Maybe at the end of the day, you try to win a division ugly at 9-8, somehow get there, and next week isn't any easier. They get New England. So we'll see where the Bengals go, but 1 week at a time is where their season is at. Trev, you were talking before about how the Buffalo Bills and how dependent they are on whether they turn the ball over or not when it comes to a win or not, right? I'm going to counter you with the Pittsburgh Steelers and say this is actually the most extreme team when it comes to that. In the Steelers' 5 wins this year, their turnover margin is a plus 12. Getting short fields for Aaron Rodgers, easy drives. They got kind of a conservative offense. They don't score a ton of points, but if you give them opportunities, they will take advantage of them. In their 4 losses, turnover margin is a minus 6. I don't think it's – I think the Steelers at this point on both sides of the ball, they are what they are. Offensively, conservative passing game, 1 reliable wide receiver. The tight ends are a fun group, obviously, with a couple of different players in there, and they don't really run the football very well. Defensively, if the defensive line is A-plus disruptive any given week like they were against the Colts, they can win. If they can't completely control the game like against the Chargers and guys are getting rid of the football, Justin Herbert getting rid of the football quickly, then you have an issue. Joe Flacco, the first time around when he played this team, he got rid of the football. He saw the coverage as well. His first read was open, and very often that was Jamar Chase one-on-one on the outside. That's really the difference in it to me. If you don't give the Steelers offense easy opportunities, they're going to have a hard time driving the ball 70, 80 yards downfield.
Yeah, and on the Bengals side of things, just the defense overall has just let them down so much. They're playing with a defensive line that doesn't have any difference makers outside of Trey Hendrickson, and obviously he's been in and out of the lineup. Their linebacker level, they're very committed to just those rookies playing in Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight, and they have really struggled. They've had some injuries in the secondary as well. The Bengals only have 1 game this season where they have allowed less than 27 points. 1 game. That's just it's a recipe for the record that they have, and honestly, they're lucky to have the 3 wins that they do, with that stat being what it is. However, on the flip side of things, we know they can still score points. Over the last 3 games, this team has a 37.7 points per game average. That is obviously number 1 in the NFL when it comes to their last 3 games. They've struggled the most when it comes to on the road. When you look at points per game on the road when they're away from Cincinnati, only 12. And it's just a massive difference between that and I believe it's 27. 27.8 is how their average score when they are at home. So with this one being in Pittsburgh, they would really have to buck the trend of what they've done so far this season. I don't know what version of the Steelers is going to show up this week But with as much as their offensive line has really struggled, I am going to give them the benefit of the doubt here. Small win, Coward's prediction, Steelers 28, Bengals 27. I don't know if the Bengals are going to have enough along the offensive line to mitigate that Steelers defensive line and how well they could play, how well they can get after the quarterback. So I'll say Pittsburgh wins this one.
I think a big question for the Bengals is going to be if they can run the ball as well as they did the first time with Chase Brown in that game. And they had a little hot stretch of running the football well. But I'm with you. I think I'm just taking the Steelers as the home team here. I don't think we're going to get quite the shootout we did last time, although it would help if the Steelers had some other plan on the outside for Jamar Chase especially. I'm going to take the Steelers 23-20. I think the defensive line does a better job of getting to Flacco this time. Flacco, you have to take away his first read and make him move in the pocket, then you feel a little bit better about it. And we'll see. Maybe the Steelers can get those turnovers that they've been winning games with, but I'll take Pittsburgh by a field goal.
The Los Angeles Chargers traveling to Jacksonville to take on the Jags. Jags coming off of a historic collapse, one of the worst in franchise history. I think the worst in franchise history when it comes to fourth quarter comebacks and leads blown in that last quarter of the game. So you know that they're looking to get revenge. The Chargers looking to keep things rolling, right? Even with the struggles along the offensive line, they are still a team that has played well. Justin Herbert obviously has played incredibly well, and their 7-3 record, I think, speaks to that with them winning 3 in a row here. So you want to talk about the Chargers, or you want to talk about the Jags?
I'm going to go with the Jaguars defense, and I think we're enough weeks into this that we have significant concern about this secondary and their inability to cover anyone over the last few weeks. This looks a lot more like last year's unit than it did the first 5 weeks of the year. The first 5 weeks, they led the NFL, led the nation. I'm used to college. They led the NFL.
That's the college lingo coming out.
I know. I had the 10 college previews
technically,
yesterday.
you are still correct.
Yeah,
well,
true.
I mean, it's not like it's incorrect. We never use that. We always say leads the league, leads the NFL. You can still say leads the nation, and you're correct there.
Yeah, I mean that is true. So either way you want to go about it, they're leading something. They're leading everybody. We'll just go with everybody. They were leading everybody the first 5 weeks in coverage grade and with 10 interceptions. The last 5 weeks, 29th in coverage grade and only 2 interceptions. And I don't know if this is the reason. And obviously Travis Hunter getting hurt and any contributions he would make on defense would play into this, but that's also the cutoff of, when they beat Kansas City, but then a couple of days later, they traded Tyson Campbell to Cleveland for Greg Newsome. And Newsome has not played particularly well in Jacksonville. And I believe Tyson Campbell has an 80 coverage grade right now for the Browns. Maybe getting to a better fit there, and Jim Schwartz's defense has helped him. But this Jags team has not been able to cover over the last 5 weeks. Again, this looks a lot more like last year's unit. Jordan Lewis got hurt, but Jerrion Jones looks pretty good in the slot. That's his natural position. It's, to me, more on the outside with Greg Newsome and with Monteric Brown really struggling out there at corner. You wonder if maybe early returns on that trade, they're regretting it a little bit. They were hoping to get Newsome to a new environment and have him play well. Hasn't been the case so far, but this team's got to get better in coverage because even with the Chargers' offensive line issues, Justin Herbert's still playing really well, and he's got a lot of weapons he can hurt you with.
Yeah, no, it's true. They definitely have to play a lot better coverage than they have over the last couple of weeks. I think they've just got to run the ball on the offensive side of the ball. I think there's a ton of conversation about Trevor Lawrence. Is he the guy? Can you rely on him in clutch situations? Can he lead the offense the way that he needs to? The answer is both yes and no. I think that's the truth of it. And where we are currently with Trevor Lawrence, not that he can't play better, but where we are currently with the Jags offense, you can't have a game where it's all on him. And when you look at how the Jags have run the ball this season, Dalton, it's as simple as this. The 4 lowest team rushing grade games that they have this season, 4 losses. The 5 highest, 5 wins. When they run the ball well, when they run the ball efficiently, they win the game because they are really, really tough to stop when they are balanced. And then obviously the defensive side of the ball has to hold up their end of the bargain as well. But they have to run the ball, plain and simple. From an EPA per rush perspective, an overall PFF grade perspective, obviously those things are sort of baked into the performance that you have there. Even on the games where, okay, maybe Travis Etienne doesn't have a ton of yards, is he efficient? Are they able to run the ball on 3rd and 2 and pick up those 3 yards on the ground, get a first down? Like, those are the things that I'm talking about. You don't have to rush for 120 yards every single week. You don't have to have a yards per carry average of like 9.5. You just have to be really consistent and effective when you hand the ball off. The games that they are, they win. The games that they aren't, they lose. Because when you put too much on Trevor Lawrence's plate right now, he has not been able to overcome a lack of a run game like that. He just is not at that point. You could say everything that you want about, hey, they don't have Travis Hunter, they don't have Brian Thomas Jr., like all that. And I'm not saying that like those aren't valid things to bring up. This is just the fact of the matter is when they don't run the ball, they don't win, they don't succeed. Now the Chargers, they're 12th in run defense grade as a team this season, but they're 18th in EPA per rush allowed. So this is a game where Jacksonville could bounce back here and we could get a much more consistent and efficient running game, especially at home. I think the Jags really need this one. I think they're going to get Liam Cohen's best, and I'm going to take the Jags to win 27-24 here.
Tough game to pick because it is a long trip for the Chargers here. And I think the one issue, I think you look at Jacksonville's offense, and to me, I think they have a lot of the same issues we talked about earlier with Carolina. They can run the football, the underneath passing game works, but Trevor Lawrence has had a hard time getting vertical, and his accuracy vertically downfield hasn't been great. He's only completed 45% of his passes targeted 10 or more air yards down the field, and this Charger defense is not going to make that any easier on you. So it's going to have to be a conservative game plan when it comes to the Jags. They're going to have to run the football, Will, because you do not want to throw into the teeth of this Charger defense in this secondary that's so good at preventing those explosives. And I think Justin Herbert really does, as long as he's got enough pass protection in this game, which is going to be a question every single week. And of course, this week against Josh Hines-Allen and Trayvon Walker and those guys up front, as long as he's protected enough this week, I think he's going to have opportunities to win downfield with all those receivers he has. I think Ladd McConkey really getting hot last week against Pittsburgh helps him out a lot. I'm going to take the Chargers. Going to be a defensive battle, but I think Herbert makes enough plays again, 20-17.
In what could be a preview of the NFC Championship game, preview of one of these teams representing the conference in the Super Bowl, the Seattle Seahawks take on the Los Angeles Rams. This game is... There are no shortage of storylines in this game. You've got two quarterbacks who are up there for MVP. You've got two head coaches that are up there for Coach of the Year. You've got two great young defenses playing incredibly well. You've got elite receivers to be able to throw the ball to. It is all there for Seahawks at Rams. Which side of the ball do you want to start talking about, Dalton? You want to talk about the Seahawks or the Rams for this one?
I'm taking Seattle's offense. And
right.
And these teams, obviously, with the records and the offensive production, the defenses have been so good. These two teams are so evenly matched. But I think the one distinct advantage, I believe, for the Rams is going to be their defensive line, especially on the interior against this young Seattle offensive line that now Jalen Sundell, who had been starting at center all season, got hurt last week. It's going to be Oluwatimi at center, which he started for them last year. He's got experience, so I think he has a chance to succeed in there. But the interior pass protection especially, I think, has been the weakest part of this Seattle team. So I have some concern about that matchup with Kobe Turner and Poona Ford and Braden Fisk on the inside. Sam Darnold, though, has been able to work around it. He may be as impressive as the passing grades and the touchdowns and the big-time throws and everything he's doing. I think, to me, he's doing all that, and this year he's got a career-low average time to throw. Last year he was right around 3.1 seconds in Minnesota. This year, 2.64. That's the sixth fastest in the NFL. So he's processing faster than ever and getting rid of the football faster than ever. And I want to focus on throws released in under 2.5 seconds. Sam Darnold, 87.7 passing grade on these throws. Second best in the NFL. 10th in yards per attempt. 6.1 yard average depth of target. Might not seem high, but when you're getting rid of the football this quickly, that's the fifth highest in the league. Still attacking downfield. Still with the second most big-time throws in the league in throws released under 2.5 seconds. So I think this is going to be a huge factor because he's not going to have a choice in this game against this defensive line, especially Verse and Young off the edge and those guys on the interior. Like I mentioned, Sam Darnold and the improvement in the processing and the quick release that he's had this year, along with the downfield explosiveness, is going to be a major factor in Seattle's offensive success this week.
So on the Rams side of things, on their offense side of things, I should say, I cannot wait for this chess matchup because the Seahawks, when they got Nicky Manwari back and when they got him into the lineup, remember, Devon Witherspoon was out with injury. And so they put Nicky Manwari in the slot. And we all marveled at the athleticism, the size combination, how well he played as a slot defender. But the thought still remained, well, what do you do with Devon Witherspoon when he comes back, right? Because he is so great in the slot because of how good of a run defender he is, the stop and start ability, how he can mirror and match guys when they have those two-way goes in space. What do you do? And the solution for them has been, we're going to keep them both out there. We're going to play dime. Over the last 2 weeks specifically, the Seahawks have the 6th most defensive snaps in dime personnel. And when you rope in nickel as well, nickel and dime, they have the most of any team. So they like to keep their defensive backs on the field because the Seattle Seahawks are at their best when they have that speed, and specifically when they are able to get those two superstars in Nicky Manwari and Devon Witherspoon out there on the field in those slot situations to be able to play in space and be a mismatch neutralizer. Well, Dalton, in the chess match of offense versus defense, when the defense goes smaller with speed, what do you want to do as the offense? You want to go heavy, right? You want to be able to put heavy personnel out there. Well, it just happens the Los Angeles Rams have the 2nd most snaps in 12 and 13 personnel. So that's 2 or 3 tight ends out there this season. And they have a 95.6 offensive grade in heavy personnel. So 12 or 13 personnel. I cannot wait to see this chess matchup, because what's the counter? Where do we go here? How do these coaches try to stay one step ahead of the other? Who is one step ahead of the other right off the bat? And then who's able to adjust quicker? Is there any sort of catch up or flip of the script? What happens? That is the part of this matchup I cannot wait to see. It is 2 of the best units, personnels on either side of the ball in the NFL. One is a major strength versus a major weakness when you look at the size versus speed, because if Los Angeles very comfortable going heavier in their personnel, and is Seattle willing to get more into their base formation? Are they willing to get more into their base? And if they are, is that effective, knowing that hasn't been what they have run over the last couple of weeks? And then when the Rams naturally spread it out sort of as that next move to try to stay one step ahead, is Seattle very quick, and can they even determine some of the personnel ahead of time with being aggressive and getting Witherspoon and Nicky Manwari out there for this battle? I can't wait to see this one. Ultimately, this one is in LA. Rams are playing hot. I'm going to go with the Rams here. I'm going to say the Rams win this game 28-23, but man, this is going to be a very fun one. I can't wait for it.
No, absolutely. This is going to be a fantastic football game, and the personnel matching, or maybe not matching in the case of Seattle's defense, is going to be fun. And I think, because I was looking at this earlier too, I'm going to go on a rant about Kyle Hamilton with the Ravens with this later. The Seahawks for the season actually lead the NFL in their percentage of plays where they have 5 or more defensive backs on the field, whether it's nickel or dime or more than that, right? And I think what this game is going to be, I think if I had a prediction for it, Trev, I don't think they're going to adjust anything. I think what they're going to do is just operate essentially with Nicky Manwari as their third base linebacker, right? And I think what you're seeing out of the NFL in general, players like Nicky Manwari, Kyle Hamilton, Shamari Connor, Derwin James. I think more and more teams are going to look at that as a very valuable position, right? That, for a few years now, there's been talked about the big nickel, right? It used to be just called the strong safety, and it was the 8th guy in the box. Now they call it the big nickel, or however you want to call it, with these guys. Kyle Hamilton's doing a similar thing in Baltimore, I'm going to talk about later, where that's essentially your third linebacker. It's just built differently than it used to be, and they're able to cover. Yes, they're a little bit smaller. Yes, they have to be tough enough, but when you look at the size of some of these guys like Derwin James, like Kyle Hamilton, like Nicky Manwari, this is the role that they're meant to play in. And Mike McDonald's done a great job of assimilating Manwari into that to help his run defense, because that's really, to me, what I see from all of these guys is that they're effective in run defense. It's not the same as a nickel that's 5'10 and 190 and their coverage first, like a Michael Carter for somebody like that for the Eagles, or a Trent McDuffie even when he gets in there in a nickel. It's a different animal when you have one of these guys in there. So I think Seattle's going to stay right there. Instead of trying to mix and match all over the place when the tight ends get on the field, they're going to rely on Manwari to try to stop the run. But I'm with you. I think the one advantage, the concern that I talked about with the Rams defensive line against the Seattle offensive line, especially with what that may do in the run game as well, I think the Rams have a little bit of a trench advantage here. I'm taking them 27-24.
The Cardinals are hosting the San Francisco 49ers, another matchup here of NFC West foes. You want to talk about the Niners or the Cardinals here for this one?
I think if you're the 49ers, and really since George Kittle especially got back in week 7, their run game's been a lot better. They've been able to block things better up front. And what you have is the ability for them, because so often we talk about the 49ers getting off the edges with the outside zone game, just following Colton McKivitz and Trent Williams to the outside and getting out there. But between the tackles, they've been a lot better lately. Their rushing grade in the last 4 games between the tackles is 8 points higher than it was through week 6, and they're averaging 4.8 yards per carry the last 4 games between the tackles. Their first 6 games through week 6, that was 3.1 yards per carry. The Cardinals give up 5 yards per carry between the tackles this year. Outside of Calais Campbell, this defensive tackle group especially has not been good enough. Now maybe, Walter Nolan's been in for 2 games now. He's looked pretty solid. He can fix a bit of that. But if you want to attack this Cardinals defense, I think the best way to do it is to get right downhill at them at these defensive tackles and at these linebackers. Don't run right at Calais Campbell because he's still the best one. But despite there being a lot of these 5-man fronts, I think the Niners do have some opportunities to get downhill on this Cardinals team, and they've really diversified their run concepts too. A little more power, a little more duo downhill. It's not just the outside zone that we're always used to seeing from them. So I think if I'm the 49ers, I'm getting downhill. I don't know who the quarterback's going to be again this week, but the fact that they can take Christian McCaffrey and Brian Robinson and get between the tackles better than they were earlier in the year is a big help against this team.
Yeah, the Cardinals on their offensive side of things, no Kyler Murray in this game. Also now no Marvin Harrison Jr., who underwent surgery, and he's missing at least this week, might miss next week as well. That's a major issue for me. Of course, you can run the offense through Trey McBride, but how explosive is it going to be? They're going to need a lot more out of the rest of the receivers and just the rest of that group in general to be able to step up. But Dalton, it's hard for me to have a lot of faith in the Arizona Cardinals right now with their offensive line. And it was an area that we were critical of this offseason that they did not address. And it's just coming to fruition that it's now starting to be a major Achilles heel of what this team is able to do. When you look at their interior offensive line specifically, because Paris Johnson Jr., I think, has been good this season. Jonah Williams has been up and down. He's been inconsistent at the other tackle spot, but that's sort of been his NFL career, so that's not a major surprise. 50.6 grade over the last 6 weeks. That's 30th in the NFL. So this interior offensive line, it's not good enough for them. And when you're down James Conner and Trey Benson, you're already down your playmakers. The offensive line has to play better, and they have not. They're one of the worst and least efficient offensive lines in the NFL. And so, to me, you're not playing well up front. You don't have the playmakers to be able to hand the ball off to in the backfield. And now you don't have Marvin Harrison Jr. For as good as and as high potential as I think this Cardinals defense is, it's hard for me to pick them in a game like this, even with them hosting against the 49ers. Give me the 49ers. I'll take them barely. I think this is a game that anybody could win, but I feel better about the 49ers here. 24-23 is the final score that I'm going with.
Yeah, this is a weird one, especially in Arizona with the game that each of these two teams is coming off of, defensively in particular. Everything about this logically tells me to take the 49ers, and honestly, I feel like more often, once in a while, I just need to do something completely against the grain. So I'm going to take the Cardinals to just find some way to pull it out 22-19.
Come on. I thought I was the only one doing that on this show. That's how I was able to catch up to you. You kept going with this is exactly what's going to happen. And I was taking a chance on those, you know what? This team probably shouldn't win this week, but I think they are, and that's how I was able to catch you in the standings. You can't be taking my move from me. What are you doing?
I'm doing it. I don't know. Something tells me just Jacoby Brissett will just find some way that makes no sense to me at all going into this, and or like somebody like Amari DiMercato will have 130 yards rushing or some nonsense like that. It feels like this almost feels like the nonsense game of the week to me, where you're just going to go, oh, okay, that's exactly not what we thought we were getting.
I do think that the NFL is a lot crazier, a lot closer in competition than people want to admit. You can be terrible one week, you can be great the next, and that's just this league when you talk about the best in the world going up against each other every single week. Okay, before we get to the next game, we got Chiefs and Broncos that we're talking about, but folks, as the days get shorter, as things get a little bit colder, sometimes it can take a little bit of a toll on how you feel. This time of year, it can be tough for a lot of people. It's a great reminder to reach out and check in on the people that you care about the most. Maybe it's giving your grandma a call, writing a letter to a friend, getting lunch with somebody that you haven't talked to in a while. When we're healthier, we stay more connected. And when we have that community and support, that's when we are at our best. Just like reaching out to a friend, starting therapy can take a little bit of courage. But once you do, you might find yourself wondering, why didn't I do this sooner? BetterHelp makes it easy to start therapy. You'll be matched with a licensed therapist based on your needs and preferences so you guys can focus on growth and goals. Over 12 years of experience, more than 30,000 therapists available, over 5 million people helped worldwide, an average live session rating of 4.9 out of 5 stars. And if you're not happy with your therapist match, you could switch therapists at any time. No hassle. This month, don't wait to reach out, whether that's checking in on a friend or reaching out to a therapist yourself. BetterHelp makes it easy to take that first step. Our listeners get 10% off of their first month at BetterHelp.com/PFF. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/PFF. Chiefs and the Broncos. So the Chiefs coming off of a loss to the Buffalo Bills right before their bye week. Now they've had their bye week here, getting a little bit healthier. Get to press the reset button a little bit. They're 5-4, and if the playoffs were to start this week, Dalton, they wouldn't be in there. So obviously they got to make up some ground here in the standings, and it could start for them here in Denver. But Denver, one of those teams that not always pretty, but hey, they're 8-2, and they'll take that any year. You want to start talking about the Broncos, or do you want to talk about the Chiefs first?
Well, let's talk about everybody's current most polarizing quarterback, Bo Nix, right? It just seems like, especially last week.
I thought it was Patrick Mahomes. I thought you were going to. You could have gone with either of them.
It feels like everybody's just kind of accepted their fate with Mahomes at this point, right? That if you doubt him, he's going to beat you anyway, and that's how it works. But with Bo Nix, especially coming off the ugly game that last Thursday against the Raiders, got the win, no question, 10-7, but it was ugly offensively on both sides, and especially for Denver. There's been a lot of questions about, even at 8-2, is Bo Nix the guy that can carry them through games like this? Well, the challenge he's going to have in this game more than any individual player or matchup is dealing with Steve Spagnuolo and all the different looks he can throw at you. And when you look at Bo Nix and how he responds when defenses disguise their coverages and when they don't this year, it's a pretty stark difference in that, okay? The Chiefs disguise their coverages, rotating safeties at the 5th highest rate in the NFL, right around 40% this season. When defenses disguise their coverages, Bo Nix has a 56.5 passing grade with 5 yards per attempt and 2 big-time throws, 5 turnover-worthy plays. Not great. Now, when they stay pretty stagnant and they give him the pre-snap looks that he can see pretty easily, they don't disguise, 73.7 passing grade, yards per attempt goes 1.5 yards up there, 15 big-time throws, 6 turnover-worthy plays. It's going to come down to big moments and how Steve Spagnuolo messes with Bo Nix's eyes, and if he can find ways to create opportunities downfield through that, or is he going to get jittery in the pocket, kind of like he did against the Raiders last week, and not set his feet, not be able to throw it accurately? I think Nix versus Spagnuolo is the biggest matchup in this game.
It's hard for me to take the Broncos in this game, given that the Chiefs know that they've got to kick it into high gear, that they've had a week off to rest, and that they've had a week to game plan here. So all of that makes it really tough for me to take the Broncos. On the Chiefs side of things, though, while they were having the bye week, we were talking about the trade deadline. There were all sorts of conversations. Hey, do they trade for Breece Hall? Do they trade for Chuba Hubbard? They need to be more dynamic out of the backfield. I talked about a couple of weeks ago how the Chiefs had the lowest, I believe it was the lowest, if not, then it was very close to the bottom, lowest amount of missed tackles forced per attempt when rushing the football from just their running backs on early downs. And so they weren't really getting any of those plus runs, plus yards when it came to those early down situations, putting themselves in more difficult third downs, even sometimes that the great Patrick Mahomes could not overcome. And I think that's why we've seen some offensive struggles from them. They have 14 explosive runs from the running back position, which is tied for dead last in the NFL this year. And that includes all downs, not just early downs. They're also, you can tell that they know they don't have the dynamic ability out of the backfield. That's why, whether it's Rashee Rice or Xavier Worthy, they're tied with the 5th most rushing attempts in the league from their wide receivers. So they're trying to get something, they're trying to manufacture a run game with the speed that they have at wide receiver. To me, Dalton, they've got to get Brashard Smith more involved. He is the most dynamic back. I know, Isaiah Pacheco, he wasn't in the last game that they played. We thought that it was going to be more of Brashard Smith, but it wasn't. And I wonder if there's just sort of this rookie, he's not exactly reading his keys the way that he needs to, or maybe it's pass blocking, just doing what he needs to do from a rookie and just an inexperienced perspective. But the fact of the matter is, he's by far their most explosive running back. And if they're going to compete against the best in the AFC, if they're going to get back to the Super Bowl, and if they're going to win another Super Bowl, they have to be more dynamic out of the backfield. Rashard Smith, now that the trade deadline is come and gone, he holds the key there. Do we get more of him in this game? I think that is going to be a big tell. We thought that we were going to see that 2 weeks ago before the bye week, and we did not. I wonder if they recognize that this week to say, hey, let's get him now more involved into the game plan, because they know that they're going to need his speed moving forward. I'm taking the Chiefs here. For as much as the Broncos have won over the last few weeks, they've won ugly. And they've won ugly against some bad teams. I don't know how they're going to win ugly against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going Chiefs 24, Broncos 17 here.
A couple more stats for you on the Chiefs running back. So one of them is you're going to go, oh, yeah. And one of them, I've got a weird bit to this for you that actually ties into another game we have here coming. So the Chiefs running backs are last in the league in yards after contact. That's not shocking, right? Okay. They are second to last in missed tackles forced total, not just early downs. Okay. Take a wild guess at who is last in the league from their running backs in missed tackles forced.
Cleveland Browns.
Nope. I would have never, ever said this. This is wild to me.
Oh, is it the Bucs?
Nope. It is the Baltimore Ravens.
Whoa.
Ravens running backs have forced 12 missed tackles this year. Derrick Henry only 10.
Would have never guessed.
I would have, and they have 12. The Chiefs have 19 at the second lowest. They have by far the fewest. The Ravens are just not missing. They're not forcing missed tackles in the. I was just looking at it now, and I was shocked to see that the team in the last place there was Baltimore. That's wild to me. Man,
I would have never expected that. Yeah, that was. I know. I've just from looking up other stats over the last couple of weeks. I know the Bucs are pretty low on that list. They haven't had Bucky Irving for a handful of weeks, so that definitely goes into it. I know the Browns are low on that list as well, and we haven't talked about them yet, so I thought that was going to be the tell. I never would have guessed the Ravens. Never would have guessed the Ravens.
Your bottom five are Baltimore, Kansas City. These are some weird ones. Wow. Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota, the Eagles with Saquon, and then the Jets fifth. Those are your bottom five. That's crazy that you have the Ravens and the Eagles in the bottom five of that list. That's just wild to me, especially.
Well, we'll talk about the Eagles here in a second as well. Are you taking the Chiefs in this one?
I'm going Chiefs. Mahomes in his career is 13-1 against Denver. I'm not going against that record. 24-20. I think Spagnuolo wins enough of those battles against Knicks, and I think Mahomes just finds a way. Because if the Chiefs lose this game, they'll be 4 games out, having lost 1 game to Denver already. They'd be just out of it. I can't imagine they could be dead in the water for the AFC West title this early.
Speaking of those Baltimore Ravens, they're traveling to Cleveland to take on the Browns here. You want to talk about the Browns side of things or keep talking about the Ravens offense?
All right, well, now that I apparently made a new point about the Ravens offense, I'm going to flip over to the defensive side. And, everybody in this 3-game win streak they have and potential, race to the AFC North title is everyone's going to go, well, Lamar Jackson got healthy. Obviously, they got a lot better, right? Of course, the offense, you get your 2-time MVP back. But big reason that they're playing better of late is that their defense has been a lot better. Since the Alohi-Gilman trade, that's when things started to improve for them. In their last 4 games, they're 10th in the league in run defense grade. They're 11th in coverage grade. Prior to that, they were 17th in coverage grade, and they had the 3rd worst run defense grade in the NFL heading into week 6. Why was that trade so important? You get Alohi-Gilman back there at free safety playing alongside Malachi Starks. What about the third guy, Kyle Hamilton, their best defensive player? Well, just like we talked about with Nick Emanwari in Seattle, they have moved Hamilton up as essentially their 3rd linebacker, big nickel, whatever you want to call him, strong safety, whatever you want to call him here. This is what you're getting out of Kyle Hamilton. Now, PFF grades relatively consistent when it comes to Hamilton for this stretch, but he's made the rest of his team better with this alignment. Trev, in the last 4 games, he's only played 6 snaps lined up as a free safety. He's basically their weak side linebacker at this point, and that's just how he's operating. He can also get off the edge and rush the passer. They're blitzing him in the A-gap, using him in stunts, different creative ways to get him involved, but he's really solidified the run defense especially. And again, these types of players like Hamilton, like Eman Wari, like Derwin James, they're going to become more valuable as the years go on. I think, honestly, we need to emphasize this more even when it comes to draft evaluation of these guys that used to be considered strong safeties and had certain roles in the secondary. These are weak side linebackers nowadays. They're just more athletic, and they're able to cover against smaller personnel more often. When you get in those sets, they're able to cover tight ends. It's not like, the old days when every linebacker you had was 240 pounds, but you're getting these bigger safeties that are athletic enough to play in these roles. Kyle Hamilton is the prototype. Obviously, there's not going to be a lot of Kyle Hamiltons in the world, but he is changing their defense. He's changed the alignment, and it's only funny because last year, the second half, when the Ravens surged on defense, he moved back to free safety, and he was the anchor of the secondary and all the single high things he could do. This year, they needed a run stuffer. Hamilton has played that. He's basically a linebacker right now. He's changed the look of their whole defense.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Just from a draft philosophy perspective, you need to be a little bit more open-minded into, when I talk about these all the time, weight percentiles, right? So you get some of these linebackers that are, 228 pounds, and, their weight percentile for the NFL might be like 13th or something. But if they can defend the run, then I think they become very, very valuable. I think we get carried away with assuming that strong safeties who maybe played near the box in college can defend the run way that they need to in the NFL. That's when you get caught in a bad way. If you have somebody who is 225-ish, 220, 225, whatever it is, and they can't hold up against offensive linemen, or they can't fit the run the way that they need to, it takes a special player to be able to do that. But Kyle Hamilton, obviously one of those special players. Since Lamar Jackson has come back, really just looking over the last 2 weeks, I thought this was very interesting, Dalton. He has a 2.35 time to throw when targeting tight ends and a 92.6 passing grade when targeting tight ends. So very much so, this isn't like, hey, tight end's a security blanket here, right? We get to our first progression, maybe it's Zay Flowers, our second guy in the progression, maybe it's Rashad Bateman. And then, okay, if those guys aren't open, let's look for where the tight end is. Isaiah Likely, Mark Andrews, whoever it is. These guys are the primary. They're looking, Lamar Jackson snapping the football, he's looking straight to the tight end. And so they are clearly, Todd Monken is their offensive coordinator. They have a tight end-centric passing game right now, and it is very, very efficient. It's not super explosive yet, but it's very efficient as Lamar is obviously, getting his feet wet coming back from injury, and he's getting in the groove of things. Now, on Cleveland side of things, 79.2 coverage grade against tight ends this season. That's one of the best marks in the NFL. So they're very good at defending tight ends this season too. So I think that this will be a little bit closer, a little bit more low scoring. I think that 7.5 line, it feels big. Ravens 21, Browns 14 is what I have it. So that's right around where I've got it. But man, just looking at that 7.5 number, that feels a little high for me. I think that it could be even a little bit closer to that. But if there's not a ton of scoring, you get a couple of touchdowns for one team and a couple of field goals for the other, that could make all the difference in the world. So I'll go Ravens 21, Browns 14 here.
Yeah, I get it. This Browns defense, especially in Cleveland, is a problem, right? And when you talk about the way the linebackers especially play, Devin Bush and Carson Schlesinger, they're really good. They're a big reason they're covering tight ends so well. Ronnie Hickman with an interception last week. He's been good at safety. And then on the outside, like I mentioned earlier, Tyson Campbell with an 80 coverage grade so far with the Cleveland Browns. He's really fit into Jim Schwartz defense and that man-heavy scheme there. So I do think this could be a grind for the Ravens. I think at the end of the day, the Browns offense just struggles too much to put up points consistently, and the Ravens are going to find a couple of turnovers, and that'll be the difference in the game. I've got Baltimore 24-10. I just don't see the Browns scoring enough points here with Dylan Gabriel the way that he's struggling.
Another potential playoff matchup here with the Detroit Lions traveling to Philadelphia for Sunday Night Football here. Lions and Eagles. We'll talk about the Lions or the Eagles here for this matchup.
I'm going to go with the Lions. I'm going to go with Jared Goff, and I think the emphasis in this offense, whether it's Dan Campbell or John Morton or whoever's calling plays for this team, is going to be to win over the middle of the field in the passing game. We've known for years now that Jared Goff has been able to do this in this offense. You look at him, middle third of the field, that middle 18 yards that you're looking at that really exposes linebackers, especially in that intermediate range. 84.4 passing grade, 8th best in the NFL. On the outside, 76 6.5, closer to 18th in the NFL, borderline top 20 there. You look at the Eagles and the great linebackers they have. I think the best set of linebackers in football with Zach Baun, Nakobe Dean, Jahad Campbell playing over the middle there. They have the best coverage grade in the NFL over the middle third of the field. You're talking about near the hash marks in there on those play action concepts. They're so athletic. They know where to be at all times in their zone coverage concepts. So I think that's going to be big. Can Jared Goff still win over the middle of the field? Dan Campbell dialed up the play action last week. Are they going to be able to suck those linebackers in towards the defensive line and create that space? Or is Goff going to have to beat the Eagles on the outside, where some other teams have been beating them with some struggles at corner? But I think that's really the question. Is the foundation of the Lions passing game is attacking the middle of the field. The Eagles have been really good defending the middle. Whoever wins that battle is at a big advantage in this game.
Yeah, I like it. It's always tough going against the spine of the Eagles defense, if you will, and the defensive line. There's Jalen Carter and Jordan Davis. At the linebacker level, obviously, is Zach Baun. The safeties are flying around playing really well. That middle of the defense, it's really tough to attack them there. But you mentioned the Lions are at their best when they're able to do that. You mentioned this already, the struggles, the surprising struggles for the Eagles run game. Saquon Barkley, since week 2, has more games with under 3 yards per carry than he does games with over 3 yards per carry. I mean, that's just a far cry from what the Eagles were last year in the regular season, on their Super Bowl run, everything. The Lions are 6th in run defense this season. And so when you look at that line right there, I understand that this game's in Philadelphia, but the Lions are sitting there as a 2.5-point favorite. I like the Lions getting points here, especially if they don't turn the ball over. I like them getting that 2.5. That feels good to me, because I just don't know how much longer I can sit here and go, it's the Eagles offensive line, it's Saquon Barkley, they'll figure it out. Because I feel like I've been saying that now for 4, 5, 6 weeks, and we're getting to the point where it's just a lot more inconsistent than we imagine the Eagles rushing attack to be. And then especially now, with all the drama surrounding A.J. Brown, out here playing Madden with I don't know who the Twitch streamer was, but he's basically saying, like, hey, if I'm on your fantasy team, get rid of me. Obviously, it's just kind of something he's saying during the middle of the week while he's playing a video game. But at the same time, anybody who watched that Monday Night Football game this past week knows this isn't the A.J. Brown that we're used to. I mean, he feels like he is checked out. I mean, there are some go balls that are up to him that it's not a 50-50 ball, because he's not fighting for it the way that we're used to seeing A.J. Brown fight for these footballs. And so, look, his presence still makes a difference, but he's still got to be somebody who can produce for him. And that with the run game not producing, and then that part of their passing attack not producing, give me the Lions in this one. I'm going to take the Lions 26-21. A little bit of an odd score. Not sure how we're getting to 26, but, we're getting to 26. That's what I got there. I got them winning by 5 here.
I'm also very worried about the A.J. Brown situation, not just this week, but long term, because they can't win a Super Bowl, to me, without A.J. Brown being the A.J. Brown he's been the last 3 years. I don't think it's possible. I think at that point, if Brown is going to play the way that he's played most of this year, especially this past game against the Packers, I just don't think the Eagles have enough at that point offensively. The other matchup, I want to go back to the other side real quick, that I think is a lot of fun. Jalen Phillips was really good for the Eagles in his first game in Philadelphia. 7 pressures, also a 79 run defense grade, and he's going to line up mostly across from Penei Sewell on that right side of the Lions offense. That to me is a primetime matchup that could decide a lot of this game, especially in the run game for the Lions. But I'm with you. I think the Lions are rolling right now. I think this offense needs to go out on the road and prove in this game that they can play with this Philadelphia team. They're fully healthy on defense this year. I think Jack Campbell could play a big factor in the run game, like you mentioned on that side. I think it's tight. I still think it's going to be very hard for Jared Goff to go in there and make a ton of big throws, but I think he gets it done enough, and I have the Lions 28-27.
Final game that we're talking about here, it's the Cowboys at Raiders for Monday Night Football. You want to talk about the Cowboys or the Raiders here for this matchup?
I'm going to go with the Cowboys offense. And look, through the first 4 weeks, the Cowboys were basically the worst pass-protecting team in football, and we were talking so much about Dak being under pressure and his ability to thrive through pressure. Well, that's at least stabilized some on the Cowboys offensive line. Since Week 5, they're 11th in the league in pass-blocking grade and 10th in pressure rate, giving Prescott more clean pockets to work with. That's good in this game, because really when you look at the Raiders, Max Crosby is their only pass rush threat. As a team, they're 25th in pass rush grade. They're 24th in pressure rate. They've just had so many struggles aside from Crosby. It's kind of the story that's been talked about for years and years with this team. Who is the other guy? Malcolm Kuntz doesn't look great coming off the knee injury. Tyree Wilson's never really panned out for him. There's really no interior push at all. So I think as Tyler Booker's gotten healthy and back into a rhythm, you're going to see Terrence Steele matched up with Crosby a lot in this game. Maybe they chip Crosby on that side, double team him a bit. I think as long as they block Crosby, Prescott's going to have a lot of chances to bounce back from a tough loss to Arizona before the bye week, and I think this Dallas offense can get back to the rhythm that they had earlier in the season.
So as I was sort of researching things for the Raiders side of things, obviously the lack of a consistent wide receiver is tough for them. You have Brock Bowers, but outside of Brock Bowers, there just hasn't been a lot of consistency. Trace Tucker's still there, but you move on from Jacoby Myers. Jack Besh isn't involved in this offense. Deontay Thornton hasn't evolved the way that you have wanted him to as a rookie. Not that it's, a nail in the coffin for him. It's just he hasn't been able to hit the ground running as a rookie. And so it's been tough for them. It really has. Offensive line's been hit or miss. Ashton Genty's been hit or miss. Now, not all of that is his fault, but I just think that the run game in general has been sort of low ceiling for what the Raiders have. So I looked at Geno, and I was like, okay, well, let's look at Geno's side of things. I wondered how he was playing under pressure, because there are games when Geno has played well, but there are also just some real stinkers that the Raiders and their overall offense have put up, and a lot of that falls on Geno Smith's shoulders, in my opinion. So when I looked this up, Geno's got a 60.9 passing grade under pressure, which it's fine. 60.9 is fine under pressure. But what I found from Geno is that he's 19th out of 33 eligible quarterbacks, because I think I did like a minimum of like 75 dropbacks against pressure. He's 19th out of 33 quarterbacks in turnover-worthy play percentage when under pressure. So you go, okay, not ideal, but that's not horrible. Though what I really found that I think was a key stat here is that he's 29th out of those 33 quarterbacks in big-time throw percentage under pressure. So Geno, he's not catastrophic when it comes to putting the ball in harm's way when you pressure him, but his likelihood to give you a big-time throw is so much less if you pressure him. For as much as we have gone after the Cowboys defense this year for not being great, they have a top 10 pressure percentage of any defense in the NFL. So they are at least able to generate through blitzes or whatever it is, they're able to generate pressure on the quarterback. Now, the back end hasn't been able to capitalize on that. They've given up a ton of passing yards, and so that's a separate issue. But if you could pressure Geno Smith, clearly he is not that same gunslinger, big-time throw type of a quarterback like he is when you don't pressure him. So to me, I think that that's a major disadvantage in this matchup specifically as well. It's been a major disadvantage of what Geno has been for the Raiders this season. I think this is a high-scoring game, but I'm going to go with the Cowboys here. I'm going to say Cowboys 31, Raiders 28.
To your point about the Cowboys pass rush, and it's been a bit better lately, especially. I'm gonna throw a stat at you here that a couple of them are just fun, and then one of them, the draft scout in you is just gonna love. All right, so since week 6, all right, here we go. Cowboys edge rushers since week 6. Jadeveon Clowney, 77.7 PFF grade, 12th among qualified edge defenders. Dante Fowler, 81. He's played less snaps, but 81 PFF grade since week 6 is 8th among qualified edge defenders. And your guy, Donovan Ezeraku, the rookie.
Tell him.
How about a 90.2 over the last 4 games, second in the NFL behind Nick Herbig from Pittsburgh? Look at that. Donovan Ezeraku emerging. Some new, Trevor.
Dalton, what if we just drafted good football players? What do you think?
It's one of my theories. It's one of my theories I've had lately. Is if you
we'll have to work on it. We got to let it play out. But I think we should explore that draft strategy.
I got a new one. I got a new motto. Here's my new draft motto: if you draft good football players, they're going to be good at football. How's that one? We like that one?
Again, we got to test it out. We got to get a couple of draft classes under our belt with that motto in mind.
And we have to define good football player. We got to
see if it stands the test of time. But you might be onto something there. Might be
it. Good player. Where'd you have him against? 16th, was it?
I think I had Ezeraku. He might have been top 15 for me.
Good player.
Top 20 at the very least, but yeah, he was the player I thought the 49ers should have picked at 11 instead of Michael.
Yeah, I feel that.
That's who I think that they should have picked at number 11 is Donovan Ezraku. But I'm not trying to go after a guy being hurt. Michael Williams, he was playing well as a run defender before he got hurt. Not trying to go after anybody. Just caping for my boy because I really liked Donovan Ezraku when he was at Boston College. It's great to see him succeeding and playing well in the pros. Appreciate everybody joining the chat live. Getting to go back and forth with you guys throughout the shows. We have previewed every game here for Week 11 in the NFL. We got all sorts of previews for you guys. Obviously, this NFL one, if you guys are really into the college slate as well, the college football channel with Dalton and Max, they went and they previewed. What'd you preview? 10 games, 11 games? What'd you get to this week?
10 games this week, yep.
10 games this week, so check out the PFF College Football channel as well. If you guys don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can see all the numbers that we talked about here on this show and so much more. Subscribe.pff.com and use the promo code PFFNFLShow25. That's how you get 25% off of the sub. Who's your film breakdown about this week?
Kyle Hamilton. We're going over some of that alignment stuff that we talked about and how basically, again, he's a linebacker now pretty much in that defense. So we went over just some examples of how he's helping and turning around the Ravens defense.
Make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any of the videos that we have, whether it's the film breakdowns, the previews, the grade release, whatever it is. Subscribe to the channel so you guys don't miss any of that. For everybody who helps produce the show, for Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying thank you once again for watching the PFF NFL show. Enjoy the weekend. We will see you guys on Monday for the grade release show. See you guys then.